See, I knew I was a real booktuber because instead of reading all of the books that are currently in my unread TBR, as well as all of the books I'm staring at right now, which are the books that I'm in the process of reading, I'm choosing to reread some of my all-time faves. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. My name's Chris, and I know how to read, allegedly. And y'all read the title, y'all saw the thumbnail. We are going to be rereading some of the books that I have rated 5 stars in the past. And I know everyone has their own reasons for why they would want to reread something they've already read, especially when they have other stuff that they want to get to as well. So I wanted to talk about my personal reason. First things first, I want a deeper and a better, more thorough understanding of what I am reading and the authors and their prose and their text. And even though I've read both of these books less than a year ago, I do want to make sure, just check in to see that in the very short time of me getting a little bit older, if there have been any perspectives or values that have changed that are going to lead me to look at these characters, at these books, a little bit differently. Also, while I am enjoying reading The Brothers Karamazov and A People's History and Sapiens, those are all not pretty chill books, right? And so being able to reread some books that might be a difficult read or might be a very engaged read, in my mind, it's still a pretty chill experience because it is something that I have read before. It is characters and environments and dialogue and prose that I'm accustomed to. And honestly, one of the reasons that I'm making this video is because my short-term memory is absolute garbage. So if I don't reread something I really like or rewatch something that I really like, I'm going to forget 90% of it within a span of like 2 weeks. But with all that said, let's talk about the books that we are going to be reading in today's video. First and foremost, one of my favorites of all time, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The story of the rise and fall, birth and death of the mythical town of Macondo through the history of the Buendia family. Intuitive, amusing, magnetic, sad, and alive with unforgettable men and women, brimming with truth, compassion, and a lyrical magic that strikes the soul. This novel is a masterpiece in the art of fiction. Now, I have started reading this book already. I believe I'm on page 93. I'm about a quarter of the way through this book, and one of the reasons I'm rereading this is because the very first time I went through it was in a haze. I have very fond memories, at least, of what I remember reading of this book, and I got to give a big shout out to Emmy Reads on YouTube. She's the one who talks so highly of this book, made me get my own copy. I have been just trying to make sure that I am more engaged with my reading, pen, highlighter in hand, whatever, and I take my time with this, especially with a book that is like magical realism, that is very lyrical in its writing. I want to make sure that I give 100 Years of Solitude the respect it deserves, the respect I should have given it the first time I read it, if we're being honest. Next book is a book I got in New York. I originally got it on Kindle, and I read it when I was on a plane to and from Puerto Rico. I blazed through this book probably in like 3 days total. This 500-page behemoth right here is The Overstory by Richard Powers. A sweeping, impassioned work of activism and resistance that is also a stunning evocation of the natural world. From the roots to the crown and back to the seeds, The Overstory unfolds in concentric rings of interlocking fables that range from antebellum New York to the late 20th century timber wars of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. There is a world alongside ours, vast, slow, interconnected, resourceful, magnificently inventive, and almost invisible to us. This is the story of a handful of people who learn how to see the world and who are drawn up into its unfolding catastrophe. Professional blurb writers can summarize a book better than I ever could, you know? This book really, I think, got me started on loving this kind of very big, interconnected cast of characters that range over an incredibly long period of time. Like, you meet some of these characters when they're children and you're with them until the day that they die, right? And I think the way that Richard Powers was able to tell multiple people's stories, then have those stories connect, tell that group story, while also having this message of how powerful the world is and how big the world is and how big nature is. And this whole sense of like environmentalism and helping save the planet was really cool. So along with 100 Years of Solitude, we are going to be reading The Overstory just to make sure that it lives up to my own hype. I hope that even with everyone's ever-expanding TBRs and ever-expanding book shopping lists, that people are able to go back to the stuff that they love and get another like bite-sized, even though 400 pages isn't really bite-sized, but you know what I mean, a bite-sized hit of nostalgia as they're going through some of the stuff that they've enjoyed in the past. So I think we're gonna get back to reading 100 Years of Solitude, and I'll catch up with y'all pretty soon. Good morning, y'all. It is the next day. I have finished my iced coffee, and somehow I am more tired than I was before I drank it. That said, we have made a decent chunk into 100 Years of Solitude. I believe I'm past the halfway point. I am on page 223 out of 417, so probably like 54% of the way there. Going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier when it came to my main goals, when I was rereading some of my favorite stuff, and I think this book right here was a great start to that. Obviously, one of the things that has gotten this book so popular and that it has like kind of been talked about in so many different avenues is its writing, right? And it's one of the books that popularized magical realism on like a grand scale. And I think rereading this has really helped me kind of take note of the magical realism that happens in those small moments. Because obviously there's sections of this book that the entire city of Macondo suffers from like an insomnia plague and people can't go to sleep for weeks on end. There's times where people are talking to ghosts and things like that, like whole conversations. So obviously in those moments, there's like very noticeable magic going on. But what Garcia Marquez does in different sections of the book, in these like one-off mentions or one-off sentences, is these mentions of magic, but they're thrown in kind of so matter-of-factly. Like there's a scene where a character is being dragged, and Garcia Marquez says that over a period of time, this character has gained the ability to alter their body weight at will. So it takes 7 or 8 people to drag this one character where they have to go. And like stuff like that, I definitely missed my first time around because I have no memory of that. And I think just those little small moments that kind of reinforce the main ideas and kind of the main themes of this book have been really interesting to like take notice of my second time around. And I will say that one of the things that this book gets a lot of heat for, especially when it comes to first time readers, is that it's very confusing, right? Like all of these characters have very similar, if not the exact same name, to the point that there is a family tree in one of the first pages, so you can remember like whose name, who's the son of who's the great grandfather of who. And that was definitely one of the biggest turnoffs that I had when I was reading this book for the first time. I still gave it 5 stars, but it was a really difficult, or maybe not even difficult, just like frustrating is too strong of a word, annoying. It was a little annoying having to read through this book and having to flip back and forth to figure out like who was who. And I have a little bit of a better idea of who the characters are and what their motivations are and stuff like that, so I'm not flipping around as much, but I'm still experiencing it a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to focus on specifically with this book was to not take it so seriously. I think the first time I read this, I was so concerned and so focused on making sure I didn't forget who any of the characters were, making sure I understood who did what, and having like 100% knowing what everything is at all times. And after I finished reading this the first time, I was looking at reviews, and a lot of people said that one of the best things about reading this book for a second time is you kind of lose some of that pressure of trying to understand everything. So mentally, I've been trying to make an effort to make an effort less, if that makes sense. And I think it has served me so well, because even if I get a little confused as to who this Jose is, or who this Aureliano is, or who this Buendia is, like I still have a general idea of what's going on. And I think being even a little bit confused kind of lends to the whole magical what's going on kind of general confusion, if you want to call it that. There was one scene that I'm going to read out right now that kind of got me. I don't know what it was, but like I was reading it late last night and it just like hit me a little harder than it did the first time I was reading it. No spoilers, but they went to insert characters here's room, shook him as hard as they could, shouted in his ear, put a mirror in front of his nostrils, but they could not awaken him. A short time later, when the carpenter was taking measurements for the coffin, through the window they saw a light rain of tiny yellow flowers falling. They fell on the town all through the night in a silent storm, and they covered the roofs and blocked the doors and smothered the animals who slept outdoors. So many flowers fell from the sky that in the morning the streets were carpeted with a compact cushion, and they had to clear them away with shovels and rakes so that the funeral procession could pass by. I don't know what it was, but that character in that section specifically at the end of their life just kind of got to me a lot more than it did the first time around. But I think when it comes to the goals I set out for this video, I think so far with 100 Years of Solitude, I am getting everything I expected to get out of it, and more, kind of just more of a thorough and deeper understanding of the themes and the messages that Garcia Marquez wanted us to get when we read this book. I think if you don't have a copy of 100 Years of Solitude already, you should try and get your hands on it. Libby, Kindle, used, whatever it may be, and it is definitely shaping up to continue being a 5-star read for me. So I will check in with y'all when I am done with 100 Years of Solitude. Let's go. All right, y'all, so it is currently 1:19 in the morning, and I was gonna film this a little bit later when I woke up, but I can't do it. So my issue with this book when I first read it was I was reading it at a time where I didn't really know how I wanted to structure my days, how I wanted to structure my reading time. So a lot of this book was read in the haze of right after I woke up and right before I went to sleep. So while I remembered characters, while I remembered events, while I remembered relationships that characters had, I didn't really remember the in-betweens. And holy hell, this book is all about the in-betweens. I don't remember the last time we left off. I don't remember a lot of things because it is very late at night and I am very tired. But I was able to read some of these pages at work, and while I was at work, I also watched the John Green / Crash Course video on this book. And if y'all haven't seen those videos, I highly recommend them. I'm going to put links to them down below next to the like and subscribe button. And I wanted to watch them because I knew it would give like some sort of deeper insight into not just the storyline of this book, but also to Gabriel Garcia Marquez and his style and prose and writing and stuff. And I think watching those videos definitely helped me appreciate his writing and this story a whole lot more. So whether you've read this book before, you're in the process of reading it, or you haven't read this book at all, I highly recommend watching those videos because I thought they were a genuine overall benefit to me and my understanding. But to go back to the whole in-betweens thing, the last third, I would say, of this book was what got really kind of hazy for me when it came to remembering kind of what happened. Going from almost forgetting what happens at the end of this book to essentially reading it for the first time. Like the last 50 pages of this book, the last 5 pages of this book might be the greatest 5-page run of any book I've ever read. And I can emphatically say that this book is going to remain on my top 5 greatest books of all time list for the foreseeable future. It's that damn good. And I think the grace that I gave myself of allowing myself to follow this non-linear story, to allow myself to be confused, to allow this like cyclical nature of bad luck, of curses that happen to everyone in this family, to recognize that within each individual, I think was such a good and interesting reading experience that I wouldn't normally get if a book was less confusing and a book was kind of more easy to understand. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like I said, it's late, but I think getting a second at bat with 100 Years of Solitude was awesome, and I would love to do it again. I was kind of thinking about how much I've talked about how often I reread books like The Godfather and The Watchmen, and how I kind of don't want to do that this year. Like, I think those books have run their course in like my pile of rereads that I like to do, and I think that I don't even have like a pile per se, but 100 Years of Solitude is definitely on that imaginary pile of books that I'm going to pick from whenever I want a comfort read, which is a crazy book. 100, that's a crazy book to say is a comfort read. I can honestly say that rereading 100 Years has gotten me so much more excited to reread the Overstory. There are certain characters in this book, certain sections of this book that I thought about for weeks after I finished reading it for the first time. And there have definitely been sections that I've read so far in the past few days of 100 Years that I'm going to be thinking about for a very long time. But with all that said, I am very tired. I am very excited to start reading this tomorrow, and I am going to blaze through this, and I cannot wait.
One day later.
I think when you're thinking of all-time duos that can function perfectly, if not exceptionally, on their own, there are a few things that come to mind. First and foremost, you have Shaq and Kobe, right? Perfectly amazing together and legendary when they were not playing together. Next up, Milk and Cookies. I know there's some glass of milk haters out there, but you can't deny the greatness. And a chocolate chip cookie by itself, also great. Third, I don't think you can go wrong with reading 100 Years of Solitude and then reading the Overstory back to back. Because while both books are pretty wildly different when it comes to their subject matter, they are very similar when it comes to the thematic elements that follow the Buendia family in 100 Years and our cast of characters in the Overstory. Because while 100 Years of Solitude can be a little confusing with the multiple generations and the very similar names, the reason you still feel like accustomed or understand these characters is because they are going through these vicious cycles of making the same mistakes as their fathers and their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers. In the Overstory, you are also following multiple generations of characters, of families, of people, and you are also following nature. Every character in the Overstory, or at least every of the main characters, has some relationship to nature. In the first story, we're following Nicholas Hole, who has a chestnut tree in his family's backyard that has been with him through multiple generations. You realize that in a similar way to the reading experience of 100 Years of Solitude, you are following the cyclical nature of human behavior, the cyclical nature of nature in the overstory. You realize that both books serve as like this very important warning that I would argue isn't really stated that blatantly in 100 Years of Solitude, but definitely is blatantly said outright in the overstory, of the consequences of ignoring your past and exploiting the environment around you, whether that is nature or whether that is the people or your like immediate surroundings, and more importantly, failing to recognize the patterns of behavior and the patterns of change that can happen consciously or subconsciously that can lead to those changes in nature in your environment. And part of me is kind of mad because I feel like a very well-written, well-spoken critique and analysis and comparison video essay on these two books would do absolute numbers on YouTube, and I don't have it in me to make that video. So take it as a challenge to y'all to make that video, because I think there's a lot of similarities that you can draw between these two books. And while that was not like conscious, like my decision was not conscious to read these books back to back because of their similar messaging, I am very excited to read the overstory now, because as I was finishing 100 Years, beginning to see a lot of the comparison points that could be made between the two authors and their writing styles and just the overall message that the author was trying to put out to the reader. So much so that after I finished 100 Years, but before I started reading this, last night was probably the most excited I had been to read a book, because I was so ready to do this like personal comparison and analysis between the two books that I considered reading this last night, or beginning to read this last night, but I decided to wait until today to get started on it. And even then, I'm only 24 pages in and I'm loving it as much as I loved it the first time I read it. This is going to be a chunky read though. I'm going to be reading about 500 pages over the next like 2 or 3 days, which is a lot even if I had absolutely nothing else to do except read this book. But obviously I have like work and errands and stuff to do. So the goal is to finish this by the end of the week, and I think with the absolute high that I am on when it comes to reading and how excited I am to read this book specifically, I think we'll be able to do it. I hope. And even if we don't 100% finish it, we are going to get pretty damn close, because I can see myself tearing through this over the next few days. I will check in with y'all once I've made a decent enough dent into this book to give y'all some more thoughts. I'm pissed. Gun to my head. The aliens have a death beam pointed at Earth, on my mama's kids, on everything that I hold dear and that I believe in. If someone asked me to tell you what day it was, I would have said it was Friday. What's that say right there? Come on, focus. What's that say right there? It says Saturday. And I know that this isn't the right mindset to have, but I fully thought that I was gonna have an extra day to read my book, an extra day to edit, an extra day to do stuff around the house and errands and everything like that. It feels like I lost a day, right? And obviously, like, that's not how time works, right? Like, I have the same amount of days I would have had if I knew today was Saturday. I got to page 165 in maybe a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours at that, which is a crazy reading speed for me. I should have sat here first. This is way better lighting. And I think one of the things that Powers does so well is he knows when to kind of skip generations of information and when to really hone in on one certain time period or certain topic or certain conversation that matters integrally. I don't even know if that's a word, but it so importantly matters, not just to the message of the story, but to the story of our character. And I might have said this earlier, I don't remember, but that first character introduction with Nicholas Hoult, that first chapter might be like one of my favorite first chapters in all of literature. Like the way, like it hones you in so much, not just to Nicholas Hoult as a character, but just to how Powers is going to write this story. And then the actual like conversion of all of the characters and all the stories that are being set up doesn't really happen until like this far, until like halfway into the book. So once you get there, now you have all these stories, all these characters that you have such a rich foundation and background on, and then you see these characters interact and their stories combined and their likes and dislikes and the things they are for and the things that they are against start like adding tension, and like it's just written so well. And that's my biggest frustration with not knowing that today was Saturday and not Friday, because it feels like I missed a day of reading this book. And of course that's not true. Like I said, that's not how time works, Chris. But it's so frustrating because I was enjoying this book so much. I was reading it so quickly. I was underlining things. Like, again, I said it last night, the most excited I've been to read a book in a very long time. I wanted to film this because I wanted to capture this moment of frustration, right? I wanted to capture this moment of being so excited and in love with a book and its story and its characters and a writer that I'm angry I can't finish this book quicker, you know? But like, even though I've made it barely a third of the way through this book, I can honestly say it's still a 5-star book. I love this book so much, and I find it difficult to talk about because I love it so much that I just wanna like shake everyone watching this video and be like, yes, this book, it's good, please read it. But that's that. I'm gonna record an actual outro to this video tomorrow morning and maybe talk a little bit more about what I've read so far in the overstory. I'm so happy that I was at least able to read. Y'all let me know in the comments down below, what's the most excited you've been to read something recently, whether it's a new release or rereading something like I am. I was so hyped to read this book. I am so hyped to finish this book. It's just a little disappointing I won't be able to do it by the end of this video, but life is life. I'm not gonna get too mad about it. Y'all, look at my unmixed coffee. Ain't that kind of cool? Look at that. Oh, that looks so rad. What? I think last night I was a little hangry, and now that like I've had breakfast and I'm about to have my coffee, I can kind of look at my lack of being able to finish the overstory in like a more objective front. And like the main goal of this video was to reread my 5-star books and see if they were still 5 stars. And even though I wasn't able to finish the overstory, I can emphatically say that both of these books are still some of the favorite, best books that I've ever read. Like 100 Years has me wanting to get better at an entirely different language so I can experience it in the author's true form. And even though I think I read like 20 or 30 pages last night of the overstory, I'm on 196 out of exactly 502 pages, so I'm not even 40% of the way through this book. This is definitely still one of my favorite books of all time, and I'm going to continue reading this the second I turn off this camera. I hope this video, if anything, serves as like a reminder to go back to the things you love every once in a while. I know like with BookTube and with buying all the books that you can because there's a good sale or something like that, you can kind of be enticed to only reading new things. And as simple as it may sound, I highly recommend everyone just take a step back, make sure you go back to your tried and true favorites. One, if you just want to see if they like stack up to the new person that you are today, but also two, just to know what you're reading and know that you're going to enjoy what you have in front of you. I personally am very excited for the next few videos we got coming out on this channel. Year 2 of Chris Reads is in full effect, and I couldn't be any more happier. If you're a first-time viewer, thank you for watching. If you're a full-time viewer, thank you for sticking around. Do something that makes you happy. Do something that makes you some money, and I'll catch you all next time. Peace.